No one noticed the skinny kid cleaning windows outside the penthouse office. But when those words shattered the silence of the billion-dollar signing ceremony, the golden pen froze an inch above the paper, and the room erupted into chaos. What the boy had seen through the glass would expose a deception so elaborate it had taken 5 years to orchestrate. And the woman behind it was about to lose everything she'd schemed to steal. It was a cold February morning in Manhattan, when 13-year-old Elijah Brooks balanced precariously on a window-washing platform 40 stories above the street. His hands were raw from the freezing water and harsh chemicals, his thin jacket doing nothing against the wind that whipped between the skyscrapers. Elijah had been working for his uncle's small window-washing company for 6 months now, ever since his mother disappeared and left him with nowhere else to go. His Uncle Ray wasn't a bad man, but he wasn't exactly good either. He paid Elijah under the table $5 an hour, no benefits, no safety equipment beyond a harness that looked older than Elijah himself. But it was work, and work meant eating, and eating meant surviving. At 13, that was all Elijah could focus on, making it through one more day. The building Elijah was working on today was the Sterling Tower, home to Sterling Enterprises, a massive conglomerate worth billions. The top floor was where CEO William Sterling kept his private offices, a glass-walled empire overlooking all of Manhattan. Elijah had washed these windows dozens of times over the past months, always invisible to the people inside, just part of the machinery that kept their perfect world spotless. But today was different. Today something was happening inside that penthouse office that made Elijah pay closer attention than usual. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Elijah could see a formal gathering. At least a dozen people in expensive suits, all surrounding a massive mahogany conference table. At the head of the table sat William Sterling himself, 62 years old, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Uncle Ray made in a year. Next to him sat his wife, Victoria Sterling, a stunning woman at least 20 years younger than her husband, dressed in a white designer suit that screamed wealth and sophistication. Elijah had seen the Sterlings before during his window-washing rounds. They seemed like the perfect power couple, the brilliant billionaire and his beautiful wife, always photographed at charity galas and society events. But there was something about Victoria Sterling that had always made Elijah uncomfortable. Maybe it was the way she smiled without her eyes warming. Maybe it was how she looked at her husband when he wasn't watching, not with love, but with something calculating and cold. Today, the gathering looked official. Lawyers surrounded the table, documents everywhere. Elijah could see the tension in the room even through the glass. This was important. This was big. And Elijah, invisible on his platform outside, had a perfect view of everything. He watched as one of the lawyers presented a thick document to William Sterling. Even from outside, Elijah could see the title page, Marital Property Agreement, Amendment and Modification. The lawyer was explaining something, pointing to various pages. William looked tired, older than his 62 years, as if something was weighing heavily on him. Victoria sat beside him, her hand on his arm, supportive and loving. The perfect, concerned wife. But then Elijah saw something that made him freeze mid-swipe with his squeegee. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it discreetly, then stood up with an apologetic smile, saying something to the room. The lawyers nodded. She walked toward the back of the office, presumably to take the call in private. But as she moved past a side table near the window, near where Elijah was working, she did something quick and subtle. There was a folder on that side table, identical to the folders on the conference table. Victoria picked it up, carried it with her toward the back office, then returned a moment later with what looked like the same folder. She placed it back on the side table, then returned to her seat next to William. The switch had taken maybe 15 seconds. If Elijah had blinked, he would have missed it. But he hadn't blinked. He'd seen everything, and something about it felt wrong. Deeply wrong. Elijah watched more carefully now. The meeting continued. The lawyers explained terms and conditions. William signed various preliminary documents. Victoria remained the supportive wife, occasionally squeezing her husband's hand, smiling encouragingly. Then came the moment for the final signature. One of the junior lawyers retrieved the folder from the side table, the folder Victoria had switched, and brought it to the main conference table. He opened it and placed the document in front of William Sterling. "This is the final agreement, Mr. Sterling," the lawyer said. "Your signature here will execute all the terms we've discussed." William picked up an expensive gold pen, positioned it above the signature line. Everyone in the room watched. This was it, the culmination of whatever negotiation or agreement they'd spent months working on. And Elijah, pressed against the glass 40 stories above the street, knew with absolute certainty that something was terribly wrong. He'd lived on the streets long enough to recognize a con. He'd seen hustlers switch cards, dealers palm drugs, thieves distract and steal. The move Victoria Sterling had made with those folders was the same kind of move. A switch, a deception. But what could Elijah do? He was a 13-year-old kid hanging outside a window. He couldn't call out. The windows were too thick, soundproofed. He couldn't get inside. Security would never let a dirty street kid into the penthouse. He couldn't call the police. They'd never believe him. But he couldn't let this happen either. Whatever Victoria Sterling had switched, whatever she was trying to make her husband sign, it was wrong. It was theft. It was betrayal. Elijah made a split-second decision. He pulled out his uncle's emergency phone, a beat-up Nokia that barely worked but could make calls. He dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I'm outside the Sterling Tower penthouse, the window washer. There's a crime happening inside right now. A woman switched documents. The CEO is about to sign something he doesn't know about. You need to get someone here now. Sir, can you explain what... There's no time. 40th floor, Sterling Enterprises now. Elijah hung up, his heart pounding. That might bring police, but it might not bring them fast enough. William Sterling's pen was already moving toward the paper. Elijah did the only thing he could think of. He started pounding on the window with his squeegee handle, hard as he could, making noise, making himself seen. Inside, several people looked up, startled by the banging. Security guards moved toward the window, but William Sterling had looked up too. His pen paused an inch from the signature line. Elijah pressed himself against the glass and shouted, knowing they probably couldn't hear him, but desperately hoping someone could read lips or understand his urgency. "Don't sign it! She switched the papers!" He pointed frantically at Victoria, then at the document, then back at Victoria. He mimicked her earlier movement, the quick switch at the side table. He did it again and again, knowing he looked crazy, knowing security was probably calling to have him arrested, but not caring about anything except making William Sterling understand. Inside the office, confusion reigned. Guards were on their radios. Lawyers were standing up, alarmed. Victoria's face had gone from serene to panicked, and William Sterling was staring at Elijah through the glass with an expression of dawning realization. The billionaire stood abruptly, making everyone in the room freeze. He walked to the window and looked directly at Elijah. For a long moment, their eyes met through the glass, the billionaire CEO and the homeless window washer, separated by glass and 40 stories and billions of dollars, but connected in this one crucial moment. William turned back to the room. Elijah couldn't hear what he said, but he could see the effect. Victoria stood up, her face pale, saying something urgent. The lawyers looked confused. William pointed at the document on the table, then at the side table where Victoria had made the switch. One of the security guards moved to the side table and opened the drawer underneath it. He pulled out a folder, the original folder that Victoria had removed. He brought it to William, who opened both folders side by side. Even from outside the window, Elijah could see William's face go from tanned and healthy to deathly pale. The billionaire's hands shook as he compared the documents. He looked at his wife with an expression of such betrayal, such devastation, that Elijah felt it in his chest. Victoria tried to run. She made it halfway to the door before security guards blocked her path. She started screaming, arguing, pointing at the windows, probably blaming Elijah for everything. But William held up both documents, and whatever difference was between them, it was enough to stop everyone in the room. 5 minutes later, the police arrived. Elijah's 911 call had actually worked. They entered the penthouse and found chaos. William Sterling, one of the most powerful men in New York, was sitting at his conference table with his head in his hands. Victoria Sterling was in handcuffs, still screaming about misunderstandings and false accusations, and dozens of lawyers were examining two versions of what was supposed to be the same document. A detective came to the window and gestured for Elijah to come inside. Security let down the window washing platform and helped Elijah climb through into the warm office. He'd never been inside the Sterling penthouse before. It was even more luxurious than it looked from outside. Marble floors, original artwork, furniture that belonged in museums. But all of that faded into background noise when William Sterling approached him. "What's your name, son?" "Elijah Brooks, sir." "I'm sorry for making a scene. I saw her switch the folders and I knew something was wrong." William's eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "You saw her switch them? How?" "I was washing the windows, sir. I saw her pick up the folder from that side table, take it to the back office, then come back with a different folder and put it on the table. Then later the lawyer got that switched folder and gave it to you to sign. I knew it wasn't right." A detective stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, can you explain what's in these documents?" William took a shaky breath. The document I was about to sign was supposed to be a modification to our marital property agreement. Victoria and I have been married for 5 years. When we married, I had a prenuptial agreement that protected my assets, my company, everything I'd built. The agreement I thought I was signing today was supposed to give her a more generous allowance and better terms in case of divorce. 10 million instead of 5. A gesture of trust and love. He picked up the switched document, the one Elijah had prevented him from signing. "But this document, this isn't what we agreed to. This gives her controlling interest in Sterling Enterprises. It transfers 60% of my company stock to her name. It gives her power of attorney over all my assets. If I'd signed this, she would effectively own everything I've spent 40 years building." The room went silent except for Victoria's sharp breathing as she struggled against the handcuffs. "Why?" William asked, his voice breaking. "Victoria, why? I loved you. I trusted you. I was already giving you 10 million. Why wasn't that enough?" Victoria stopped struggling, her face transformed from panic to something harder, colder. The mask of the loving wife finally dropped completely. "Because 10 million isn't billions, William. 10 million is what you make in a month. It's nothing compared to what you're actually worth. Did you really think I married you for love? You're 40 years older than me. You're boring. You're obsessive about your work, and you're so trusting it's pathetic." She laughed bitterly. "I've been planning this for 5 years. 5 years of playing the devoted wife, the perfect partner. I researched every aspect of your business, made connections with your competitors, learned everything about Sterling Enterprises. All I needed was control of the company, and I'd have real power, real wealth. Not just the scraps you were willing to throw me. So you forged documents, committed fraud?" "I had them prepared by a lawyer, a different lawyer, one you've never met. The documents are legally perfect. If you'd signed them without reading carefully, which you were about to do because you trusted me so completely, they would have held up in court. I'd have owned your company within 30 days. William looked like he might be sick. How many others were involved? "Just me and my lawyer. Everyone else in this room believed we were signing the legitimate agreement. That's what made it so perfect. All these witnesses seeing you sign voluntarily, with full legal representation present. No one would have questioned it." A detective pulled out his handcuffs. "Victoria Sterling, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted grand larceny." As they led her away, still ranting about how close she'd been to success, William sank into his chair and looked at Elijah. "You saved me. You saved everything I've built. How did you know? How did a kid washing windows know to pay attention?" Elijah shifted uncomfortably, very aware that he was dripping dirty water on a marble floor worth more than his life. "I've been on the streets a lot, sir." "You see things. You learn to recognize when someone's running a con. The way she moved, the way she switched those folders. I've seen hustlers work the same way. I just knew it was wrong." "Where are your parents?" "My mom disappeared 8 months ago. Never knew my dad. I've been staying with my uncle working for his window washing company. It's not much, but it's better than foster care." William was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "James? William Sterling, I need you to come to the penthouse immediately and bring David Chen from our legal department. Yes, now." After he hung up, he looked at Elijah. "Don't go anywhere, please. I need to speak with you after I handle some things." Over the next hour, Elijah sat in the corner of the penthouse while William Sterling worked with lawyers and police to document everything. The forged documents were examined and catalogued as evidence. Victoria's lawyer was identified and would be arrested later that day. The legitimate agreement was properly signed and filed, with multiple witnesses confirming it was the correct version. Through it all, Elijah watched, trying to understand how his day had gone from washing windows to being in the center of a billion-dollar fraud case. Finally, the police left. The lawyers packed up, and William Sterling sat down across from Elijah with 2 cups of hot chocolate, one for each of them. "Tell me about yourself, Elijah, everything. I want to know who you are beyond the kid who saved my company." So Elijah told him. About his mother, who'd struggled with addiction and eventually disappeared completely. About bouncing between his uncle's couch and occasional nights in shelters when his uncle needed the space. About dropping out of school to work full-time because his uncle needed help, and because missing too many days would trigger truancy officers and questions about his home situation. About being 13 years old and feeling like he was 70, tired and worn down by the constant struggle to survive. William listened without interrupting, his expression growing sadder with each detail. "You're 13. You should be in school, playing sports, being a kid, not working 40 stories up in dangerous conditions for $5 an hour." "It's what I've got, sir. I'm not complaining." "No, you're not complaining. That's part of what makes this so heartbreaking." William set down his hot chocolate. "Elijah, I want to make you an offer. Actually, several offers. But I need you to listen to all of them before you respond. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir. First, I'm going to report your uncle to the Labor Board. What he's doing is illegal, employing a minor without proper permits, paying under minimum wage, using inadequate safety equipment. He's going to face fines and possibly criminal charges." Elijah felt panic rising. "But that's my only job. That's how I eat." "Let me finish," William said gently. "Second, I'm going to hire you. Properly. Legal work permit, minimum wage plus overtime, full benefits including health insurance. You'll work in our mailroom after school, no more than 20 hours per week. It's not glamorous, but it's safe, legal, and it pays better than window washing. After school, but I don't go to school. Third, I'm enrolling you in school, a good private school, full scholarship, which I'm personally funding. You'll get caught up on everything you've missed, get proper tutoring and graduate with your age group." Elijah couldn't process what he was hearing. "Sir, I can't accept." "Fourth, and this is non-negotiable, I'm finding you a place to live. Not with your uncle, not in a shelter. A safe, clean apartment, or possibly with a foster family that's actually qualified and caring. Social services will be involved. Everything will be legal and proper. You'll have a real home." "Why?" Elijah's voice cracked. "Why would you do all this for me?" William's eyes glistened with emotion. "Because you saved me, Elijah. Not just from Victoria's fraud, though that alone would be worth everything I'm offering. But you saved me from something worse. You saved me from my own blindness. I was so successful in business, so confident in my judgment, that I'd become arrogant. I trusted the wrong person completely and almost lost everything." He paused, collecting himself. "And then a 13-year-old kid who has every reason to focus only on his own survival, who could have ignored what he saw and kept working, instead risked everything to warn a stranger. You showed me what real character looks like. You showed me that the measure of a person isn't their wealth or success, but their integrity when no one's watching. I just did what was right." "Exactly. And just doing what's right is apparently rarer than I thought. You have something special, Elijah. Intelligence, observation skills, courage, and most importantly, a moral compass that stayed true even when life gave you every reason to become bitter and selfish. I want to give you the opportunities you deserve, not as charity, but as investment in someone I believe will do great things if given the chance." Elijah felt tears running down his face, unable to stop them. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Say you'll let me help you. Say you'll go to school, work hard, and become the person you're meant to be." "Yes," Elijah whispered. "Yes, I want that." Over the next few months, Elijah's life transformed completely. William Sterling was true to every promise. Elijah was enrolled in Riverside Academy, one of Manhattan's best private schools. He got his own room in a foster home run by Maria and Thomas Chen, a warm couple who'd been fostering teens for 15 years. The transition wasn't easy. Elijah was behind in every subject, struggling to catch up after missing so much school. His classmates were wealthy kids who'd never known struggle, and he felt like an alien among them. The mailroom job was humble compared to his dramatic rescue of Sterling, and some people treated him like he should be grateful just to be there. But Elijah worked harder than anyone around him. He studied late into the night, determined to prove he deserved the opportunity he'd been given. He saved every penny from his paycheck, still unable to shake the street kids' fear that it could all disappear tomorrow. And once a week, he had lunch with William Sterling. Not in the penthouse, but at a small diner near the office where they could talk without the pressure of Sterling's empire surrounding them. They talked about everything: school, work, life, philosophy. William became something Elijah had never had: a mentor, a guide, and eventually a friend. "You're different than I expected," Elijah said during one of these lunches about 6 months after the incident. "How so? I thought billionaires would be, I don't know, cold, focused only on money and power. But you actually care about people. You care about me, and I'm nobody." William smiled sadly. "The Victoria situation taught me something important. I'd spent so much time building my empire that I'd forgotten to build relationships with substance. I'd surrounded myself with people who wanted something from me, investors who wanted money, employees who wanted promotions, socialites who wanted status. Even my wife just wanted my wealth." He paused, stirring his coffee. "But you didn't want anything from me. You risked your job, possibly your safety, to warn me about something that didn't benefit you at all. That's rare, Elijah. That's precious. And it reminded me what actually matters. Not the billions, not the empire, not the success, but integrity, loyalty, and genuine human connection. So I'm like your redemption story," Elijah teased. "No, you're like my wake-up call. You reminded me who I wanted to be before I became obsessed with building Sterling Enterprises, before I forgot that money is just a tool, not a purpose." As Elijah's first year at Riverside Academy ended, he'd achieved something remarkable. Despite starting months behind, he'd caught up to his grade level in every subject and even excelled in several. His teachers wrote glowing reports about his work ethic and determination. He'd made a few genuine friends, kids who liked him for himself rather than his dramatic backstory. But more importantly, he'd started helping other kids. When he heard about a classmate struggling with the abusive home situation, he connected them with resources. When he saw a homeless kid near the school, he bought them lunch and told them about programs that could help. He volunteered at shelters on weekends, using his own experience to connect with kids who'd lost hope. William noticed, "You're doing what I should have been doing for years, using resources to actually help people, not just writing checks to charities and feeling good about myself." "Checks help too," Elijah pointed out. "But yeah, sometimes people need more than money. They need someone who understands what they're going through. Which is why I want to talk to you about something. A proposition." They were in William's penthouse office, the same room where Elijah had watched through the window a year ago, but now he was inside, comfortable, belonging. "I'm starting a new foundation," William said. "The Second Chance Foundation. Its mission is helping at-risk youth who've fallen through the cracks of the system. Kids like you were, who are smart and capable but don't have opportunities or support. I want to fund scholarships, job programs, mentorship initiatives, housing assistance, everything that helped you but on a larger scale. That's amazing. And I want you to be part of it. Not now. You need to finish school, go to college, build your own life first. But eventually, when you're ready, I want you to help run it, because you understand these kids in a way I never will. You've lived what they're living. You can reach them when others can't." Elijah felt the weight of the opportunity and the responsibility. "That's a lot of faith to put in a 14-year-old. I'm not putting faith in a 14-year-old. I'm putting faith in someone who proved their character when it mattered most. Age is just a number. Integrity is forever." 2 years passed. Elijah thrived at Riverside Academy, graduating in the top 10% of his class. He got into Columbia University on a full scholarship, planning to study social work and business. His foster family, the Chens, had become his real family. His uncle Ray had been fined and lost his business license, but Elijah held no grudge. Ray had given him work when he desperately needed it, even if the conditions were illegal. Victoria Sterling had been sentenced to 15 years for fraud and attempted grand larceny. Her lawyer got 20 years. Both were appealing, but the evidence against them was overwhelming. William had divorced Victoria immediately and publicly sworn off marriage forever. Once burned was more than enough. But the most significant change was in William Sterling himself. The near loss of his empire had transformed him. He'd stepped back from day-to-day operations of Sterling Enterprises, appointing a trusted CEO to run things while he focused on philanthropy. The Second Chance Foundation had launched with $100 million in initial funding and was already changing lives. On the 2-year anniversary of the day Elijah had pounded on that window, William invited him to the penthouse for a special meeting. When Elijah arrived, he found William standing at the very window where their lives had intersected. "I stand here sometimes," William said without turning around. "I look at this window and think about how close I came to losing everything. One signature, one moment of blind trust. That's all it would have taken. But it didn't happen," Elijah said, joining him at the window, "because I was in the right place at the right time." "No, because you were the right person who made the right choice. Timing was coincidence. Character was choice." William turned to face him. "Elijah, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." "Okay. I've been thinking a lot about legacy, about what happens to Sterling Enterprises when I'm gone. I have no children, no family beyond a distant cousin I haven't spoken to in decades. I've built something massive, but I have no one to leave it to." He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "I'd like to change that. I'd like to adopt you, legally, officially, make you my son and my heir." Elijah felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "William, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it. I'm not trying to replace your mother or give you a fantasy family. I'm just offering what I should have offered a long time ago, a real permanent place in my life. Not as the kid I'm helping, but as my son. My family." Elijah looked out the window at Manhattan stretching below them. 2 years ago, he'd been hanging outside this window, freezing and desperate, just trying to survive another day. Now he was standing inside, warm and safe, being offered something he'd never dreamed possible. "Yes," he said quietly. "I don't need to think about it." "Yes." William's eyes filled with tears. "Yes? You've been more of a father to me than anyone in my life. You believed in me when I was nobody. You gave me chances I never thought I'd have. You taught me that success isn't about money, it's about character. Of course I want to be your son. Officially." They hugged, both of them crying, both of them overwhelmed by the improbability and perfection of how their lives had intertwined. The adoption was finalized 4 months later. Elijah Brooks became Elijah Sterling, with all the legal rights and responsibilities that came with being William Sterling's heir. The media had a field day with the story, the window washer, who became a billionaire's son. But Elijah and William ignored the publicity and focused on what mattered, building their relationship and their shared mission. Elijah graduated from Columbia at 22 with degrees in social work and business administration. He immediately joined the Second Chance Foundation full-time, bringing his unique perspective to every program they developed. Within 5 years, the foundation had helped over 10,000 at-risk youth find stable housing, education, and career opportunities. And every success story reminded Elijah of that February morning when he'd been the one who needed saving, when he'd been the desperate kid just trying to survive, when one choice to do the right thing had changed everything. On his 25th birthday, William gave him a gift, a framed photograph. It showed the Sterling Tower from the outside, taken from approximately where Elijah's window washing platform would have been 2 years ago. On the glass, someone had photoshopped a reflection of a young boy pounding on the window. The inscription read, "To the boy who saved my life and taught me what really matters. To my son, who reminded me that wealth is measured in character, not currency. Thank you for having the courage to pound on the glass. Love, Dad." Elijah hung it in his office at the Second Chance Foundation, where he saw it every day. where it reminded him that one moment of courage, one choice to speak up when staying silent would have been easier, could change not just one life, but dozens, hundreds, eventually thousands, because William Sterling had been saved that day. But so had Elijah Brooks, and together they were saving countless others who just needed someone to believe in them the way they'd believed in each other. All because a homeless kid washing windows had noticed something wrong and refused to stay silent. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is shout a warning when everyone else is silent. Sometimes the best thing you can do is trust your instincts when everyone else is blind. And sometimes the person hanging outside the window, invisible and forgotten, is the only one who can see the truth clearly enough to save everyone inside. Elijah Sterling knew that lesson well, and he would spend the rest of his life making sure other invisible kids got their chance to be seen, to be heard, to be saved. Just like he had been, one shout through the glass at a time.